In this lesson, we're going to talk about how to use grays in your painting. And by grays, I mean having mixtures of gray color, whether it's using complements or palette scrapings. In this case, we're going to use both those along with Payne's gray. How to modify colors to mute them slightly and also to harmonize them, which will hold your painting together. Notice the image we're using. It's a view of the Bighorn Mountains in Wyoming. It's in the summer. There's a lot of cloud shadows in front, a lot of cloud shadows, and there's a lot of contrast, a lot of sunlight and shadow, a lot of green. So we're going to talk about mixing a variety of greens, but mainly how to use grays. And when you have this much of one color, I want a way to mute it so that the stronger colors stick out more. So we're going to think about and talk about and paint a variety of mixtures of greens that go from very gray to very green. So there's a wide range of muted and strong color. Now this is the palette, and I have three grays here. This is what I do a lot of times here. This is ultramarine blue and orange with some white. And then I've added more white just to get a couple of different values. And I'll use that sometimes along with palette scrapings. These are palette scrapings just after painting for a half a day. I get about this much of, I gotta clean off the palette, blend it all together. And generally, if I want to make it a little cooler, I add a little blue or a little orange to make it warmer. But you're never quite sure what you're going to get. It depends on what you're going to be painting. If I'm doing a lot of summer scenes I always get a very gray green. Here it's just kind of a flat gray. So it's not that you have to have precise grays, that you're looking for this perfect mixture of gray color to add to your colors. Just anything that's muted. And generally I'll mix up 2 or 3 different ones, maybe some a bit more blue in it like this. And this has a bit more warmer colors in it, oranges and yellows. So the blue and orange, the palette scrapings. And again, you always have to adjust those palette scrapings. If they're too dark, you have to add a little white. I don't want them real dark. And this is Payne's gray. Of course, it comes in a tube, and it's some kind of blue and black mixture. And here I've added some white to it to see how it looks, lighter value. But I could use just one of these or all of them, and then I can adjust this too. If I'm going to get Payne's gray and add a pile of Payne's gray with some orange in it, or ochre in it, or violet in it, then I have a muted color that has some color in it. Or I can just use the Payne's gray and adjust that. I add it to the colors as I'm mixing. But these are what I use. I've talked before about using raw umber and a little white. I generally use kind of a dark halftone. Don't usually use it real dark. Because real darks don't really need to be gray. They're already somewhat, you mix up a blue and orange or a blue and cad red, and it's already going to be pretty gray. Usually have standard colors I use for darks, and they're never colors that are real bright. So blue and Indian red makes a good dark, blue and cad red, or blue and orange. So if I'm looking at the photograph, I see about 5 or 6 areas that I want to maybe think about how I'm going to use these grays. And let's start with the sky. And I just line them up in here. I use palette knife to pre-mix them. I use palette knife more often for larger paintings because I have larger areas to cover. But even for a small painting like this, once in a while to kind of pre-mix, it's always good to kind of test it as you're mixing. Now the sky, of course, it's really light, so I'm going to start with white. Then I want to pick a color. It looks gray to me, but I don't want to think just gray. Even though there's a lot of colors in all these grays, I don't want it to look gray. I want it to be a muted color. So I'm going to look at the sky and I see a violet. So I either want to think of a color from the color wheel, a primary or secondary color, and get it the right value. then I can adjust it. Everything looks real light on the palette, but until you get it up there. And when you use a palette knife, you're going to really overuse. You're always going to mix too much, which is okay, because most of us paint too thin. This way we have a lot of paint mixed up. Now I want it muted, but I've made the decision that I see this as a muted violet. Now I could adjust that. I can make it, a little bit more of a blue violet or red violet by adding blue or alizarin. Now I'm going to pick one of these colors, and it really doesn't matter. Again, I use the palette scrapings a lot because they're just handy. I hate to throw away that much paint. So let's use Payne's Gray. And I'm going to use some of the lighter. I don't want to reach up and get the real dark value and put it into the light. I want it pretty close to the value that I'm mixing. And if I'm mixing something darker, I don't want to add a color that's real light. Now I do see another color in there. I see two values in the sky. This value and then lighter. And the lighter is the sky part that's, you can kind of see it in the photograph there, just next to the mountains. It's where the clouds are higher up. The darker clouds are lower. These are the darker clouds. And the higher up, I'm using same color as this, so it's a muted violet. Then I'm going to warm it, because those high up clouds are warmer. And again, I have to make sure I'm not getting too much color. It's a constant battle to have that right touch of getting just the right amount of color or getting too much. So it's a real subtle change. A muted violet with a little bit of ochre. And then this is just a muted violet. Violet with some of the, I think, Payne's Gray added to it. Then the hillside in the background. The background hills, when I look at that, they're far away. They're trees that are far away. When you look at the photograph, the trees in front are real green because they're close to you. The trees way in the distance are the same trees. Well, there may not be cottonwoods. There may be fir trees. But they're so far away, they're more of a blue-green than a green. So foreground trees are green. The background trees, distant trees, are blue-green. And that's what I'm looking at the light. The light is predominant. The shadow areas are, they're there, but there's not as much. So it's easier, I think, to put in the predominant value, which would be the light, instead of the shadow. So I'll get white, try not to mix as much this time. But don't worry too much about that. You can always end up using it. This is a real light value. My next painting I can use what's left over just to lighten up some colors. And when I want to mix this value, I'm looking at the value of the sky, because that's how much, this has to be, compared to the sky, that much darker. So that's my comparison. I don't want to stare just at the trees or the mountain itself, but stare at the relationship between the sky and the trees. So now a little bit of ochre. Here's my yellows, up in here, yellows, oranges, reds, alizarin, ultramarine blue, violet, and green. Then I have the grays here. I'm putting it down there and I'm glancing at the photograph real quick. Photograph on the screen, and if mine's too dark, you can really tell it. And when I look at the photograph, I'm kind of looking at the sky to see how dark the mountains are. If I just stare at the mountains, they get lighter and lighter. And I don't have to gray this too much, but I do want to gray it some. When I'm using these grays, I want a real nice color. The muted color has a real nice feel to it. And I'm going to use some of the blue and orange mixture, my blue and orange gray. Again, make it about the same value. That makes a pretty nice green. Then the shadow, right next to that's a blue-green. Get some blue and ochre. Then I'm going to lighten it some. But I know also the shadows on the hillside are going to be a lot lighter than the shadows in the foreground trees. So I have to take that into consideration. Photograph might have the shadows on the mountains too dark because the camera doesn't always pick up that aerial perspective. So not much ochre, it's mostly just blue, real bluish green. When you think of the color wheel and the color between blue and green, you have blue-green obviously. But that can range from almost all green to almost all blue. So it's a pretty wide range in there. I'm going to add a little bit of the gray, the same value. And again, knock it down some. Now I'm going to jump down to the sunlit green that's in the middle ground. So it's going to be the brightest color in there only because the foreground is in shadow. So the middle ground's my strongest. And I'm going to see it as a little more of a yellow green, almost just green. But remember, you can't just say it's green. I mean, it could be green. But then there's also yellow green, and then there's blue green. I'm going to say this is green, almost yellow green. But I know it's going to be pretty muted, even though it's going to look sunlit and it's going to be light. And about the strongest color in there as far as sunlit colors. But it's far enough away that it's going to be more muted. And these aren't final colors. I'm going to break them up after I put them down, get some broken color in them. But this is the color I want to paint into. I got it way too dark. Got to compare it with this, and it's a lot lighter than that. I want that contrast. You really have to compare one shape and value with another. If you don't, your values will never be right. And that's a pretty good jump from that to that. Get a bit more yellow. And white. Now I'm going to add some gray. Let's go with the... Doesn't really matter which one. I could just have one gray up there that... This also ties the colors together a little bit more. And once in a while, the grays can act as a color. Like I could take some of the Payne's gray, just add yellow to it, and it turns green. It gives me a very muted green. Or I could take Payne's gray and alizarin, and it gives me a real muted violet. So there's a lot of varieties or different ways of thinking about mixing colors with grays. Of course, they can gray colors, but they can also be used as a color. Obviously, it's been used as, or I'm using it as a blue here. So now I do want some other colors in this field, and I see some red. So I'm going to get cad red light and white. This is true cadmium red light. I usually use a cad red hue because I don't need red that strong, but haven't used full cadmium for quite a while, or a true cadmium red. Now I'll get some of these grays and really knock that down. Now that'll be some of the red, and I could throw a little orange in there. This is some of the colors I'm going to throw into that field. Again with the grays in there. And sometimes just straight gray to knock down some areas. Then I have a yellow-green in shadow for the hills that are in shadow in front. I'll jump to the trees first. The trees are a deeper green, but they're in shadow, so they're pretty dark. And I'm comparing it with this sunlit field. So blue and yellow, and if I'm not sure which yellow, I'm going to use both of them. I think it needs cad yellow, but I'm going to throw some ochre in there too. Get the right value. It's a little too dark. So I'll add, I don't need to add white necessarily, I'll just add some more ochre and cad yellow light. And then add a little bit of the gray to that. Now there's going to be a lot of colors. There's going to be a lighter green than this for the field in front that's in shadow. And I'll mix that up. But I want to have some modifying colors that are gray. So I'm going to do that real quick. These are just the pre-mixed colors like the violet. And I'm going to get them. Now, don't always do this ahead of time, but just to show you what I'm thinking. Pretty strong violet. You know, it's just dioxazine, purple, and white. When I squeeze it out on the palette, I usually have a little white in it. Add white to it right away because I never use it that dark. So now I'm going to add some gray to it. And that gives a pretty nice muted violet. I'm going to use this. Yeah, that works pretty good. Because real subtle gray colors, they harmonize real well, and they're a lot more beautiful than colors straight from the tube. They're just, someone described them as poetry. If you have the right values and just a little bit of muted color, it really works really well. And I think that's where a lot of subtlety comes in, learning how to use those colors. So same thing here, and I'm going to start on the painting. I'm going to get a little orange and add some gray to it. Now I have to make sure it still stays orange. And that's almost too gray. I know I want it a little lighter, so I'm going to add a bit more orange to it. So I got a lot of gray colors here, and now how I apply them makes a big difference too. Do one more. Let me do some ochre. Get some yellow ochre, a little bit lighter, and add some of the orange blue gray to it. Alright, now I'm ready to start painting.